Mr. Carroll.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
All is well.
Ms. Firestone, are we on?
Yes, we are now. It just went live.
Okay.
We're good to start.
I'd like to call to order this policy meeting of the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, dated February 3rd, 2022. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Parsons, would you like to share with people how they can join us remote?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a couple attendees that are following the meeting. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of the webinar platform. If there are any questions of the board during the meeting, staff will be monitoring that. We are also streaming this live on YouTube, as we have done for the past almost 2 years now. This platform has been, I think the quality has been improved by some of the additions to the boardroom. As you can see, the camera has been greatly upgraded, and we believe that the sound and volume and microphone issues that have been noticed in the past are corrected. So we would ask that anybody that is attending remotely, please let staff know if you identify any continuing issues that we might need to address. But we're very pleased with the outcomes, and we hope you are too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Parsons, I'm going to make this comment. I couldn't be more tickled to see the audio visual that we have here today, with the expectation that we're going to have some well-publicized meetings going forward, and the public's going to be able to actually enjoy watching us and conducting business here in Central Virginia for transportation. So thank you and staff for doing this. We need to have certification of a quorum. Ms. Firestone, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges,
Here.
Ms. Barnhart.
Present.
Charles City County, Mr. Cota. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
Present.
Mr. Holland,
Here.
Mr. Winslow, Ms. Haley. Goochland County, Vice Chair Lascolette.
Here.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Davis. Mr. Peterson. Ms. Pritchard. Henrico County, Ms. O'Bannon. Mr. Thornton.
Here.
Mr. Brannon. New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Present.
Mr. Tiller. Mr. Evelyn. Powhatan County Chair Williams.
Here.
Ms. Carmack. City of Richmond, Mr. Addison. Ms. Jordan. Ms. Lynch. Dr. Newbill.
Here,
Thank you, Dr. Newbill. Mr. Jones. Ms. Larson. Ms. Robertson. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. GRTC, Ms. Tim.
Present.
RMTA, Ms. Dean. Secretary of Transportation Designee, Mr. Mann.
Here.
And Mr. Riblet.
Here.
CTAC, Mr. Martin.
Present.
Ms. Guthrie. DRPT, Mr. Brule.
Present.
Ms. Dubinsky.
present.
Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Rucker. FTA, Mr. Koenig. Ride Finders, Ms. Tisdale,
Here.
Ms. Ruffin. And Virginia Department of Aviation, Mr. Burnett. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Firestone. At this point, are there any amendments to our agenda this morning?
Mr. Chair.
Please, Mr. Parsons.
Staff would recommend adding an additional item, item A8, for a brief presentation on the draft Bike Ped RVA 2045 plan, with a recommendation to open a public comment period for that plan.
Okay, I have a motion to amend the agenda as proposed. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Hodges. Any discussion on the motion?
That was Mr. Lumpkin.
I'm sorry,
Next
Mr.
time I
Lumpkin.
won't sit next to him.
And you've even got your name tags, too, so
That's right.
And they're not mixed up.
Right.
my apologies to both of you. Discussion on the motion. Ms. Firestone, would you call the roll?
Yes, Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges,
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll,
Aye.
Mr. Holland,
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Lumpkins,
Aye.
Ms. Lascolette,
Aye.
Henrico County, Mr. Thornton,
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page,
Aye.
Powhatan County Chair Williams,
Aye.
City of Richmond, Dr. Newbill,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan,
Aye.
Capital Region, sorry, do we have Mr. Rutledge? I haven't finished my. GRTC, Ms. Tim.
Aye.
And Secretary of Transportation, Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Mr. Riblet,
Aye, but just one vote for us.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call.
Ms. Firestone, that moves us to approval of the January 6, 2022 minutes. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion from Dr. Newbill for approval, and I have a second from Mr. Hodges. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Firestone, please call the roll.
Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges,
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll,
Aye.
Mr. Holland,
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Lumpkins,
Aye.
Ms. Lascolette,
Aye.
Henrico County, Mr. Thornton,
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page,
Aye.
Powhatan County Chair Williams,
Aye.
City of Richmond, Ms. Jordan,
Aye.
Dr. Newbill,
Aye.
thank you both. GRTC, Ms. Tim. Aye. And Mr. Mann.
Aye.
Thank you, that concludes the roll call for that.
Ms. Firestone, that will move us to our public comment period. Please come forward if you'd like to address this board. Please give your name, your address. We will allow you 3 minutes. If you represent an organization, please provide us with the name of your organization, and we'll provide you with 5 minutes. Mr. Parsons, do we have anybody that wishes to join us remote?
We do not.
And I will close the public comment period. The chair at this time doesn't have anything to report. If any members would like to take the opportunity to share anything that they would like to share, I will yield my time to them. With that, we will move to the Secretary's report. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd raise everybody's attention for starting on page number 8 in the agenda packet. There is an update on our current work efforts. We will have a brief presentation as we saw the agenda amended today on the bicycle and pedestrian plan update. The other thing that I wanted to raise to your attention this morning is the STBG CMAQ sub-allocations. As you know, the TPO has the ability to administer some transportation funding under these two grant areas. And a total of 34 new or rescope projects were submitted this year. Staff is working to review those in addition to 9 existing projects, requesting over about $225 million. Staff expects to develop a draft allocation plan this month in coordination with VDOT and the TAC. So that will be back for your review and approval later this spring. The next item is the work status and financial reports for December, starting on page 12. Staff will be happy to take any questions. I will note that we are not ahead of schedule on spending our existing allocations. As you know, we have a few positions that are out for advertisement. We're trying to fill those. We expect that once those positions are filled, we will be able to ramp back up our staff expenditures for these various work tasks. But we are not in danger of going over budget at this point. The last item in the Secretary's report is the CTAC report on page 22. And I know Mr. Martin is joining us remotely if you wanted to provide any additional background or updates on the CTAC.
I have nothing to add, Chet, but thanks for the offer.
And that concludes the Secretary's report.
Thank you, Chet. That moves us to the amendment that we are voting on for our bylaws. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Before in your packet at page 24 are the bylaws of the planning organization. As you directed staff to prepare amendments to them you will see the amendment in strike-through form or track changes on page 5 of 9 of the bylaws themselves, page 28 of your packet. Very simple amendment. As you recall, the direction to staff was to prepare the amendment so as to allow the organization to conduct meetings electronically going forward. You had suspended the bylaws during the pandemic, during COVID, which we're still within, so that item in the bylaws restricting the ability to do that was in abeyance. But going forward, once the emergency declarations come to an end, and they did for a short period of time statewide, but now they're back in, but locally they have always been in from the very beginning of the pandemic. At any rate, once that declaration of emergency were to expire, the bylaws would, by action of the organization, would come, if you took action to bring the bylaws back into operation, you would no longer have the ability to meet electronically. So we wanted to make sure that you had that ability going forward. So the direction was to remove this provision that would allow that. In addition, there would be 2 separate actions this morning. If you choose to move forward with this bylaw amendment, we would recommend that, but also recommend the policy document, which is also included in your packet, which you recommended staff to, or directed staff to prepare, which would, under FOIA, public bodies are required, if they want to meet electronically, or allow members of the public body to meet electronically, they have to adopt a policy to provide for that and to provide for compliance with FOIA. So this policy and procedure document provides for that. It's the same, virtually the same policy and procedure that both Plan RVA and the CVTA have in place to allow for this. We recommended that the TPO adopt it a couple of years ago, but the TPO at that time chose not to do so. But now I believe with circumstances being changed, the need is seen. So we prepare that for you. If you choose to move forward with that, and it is recommended, we would request a vote for that as well. The bylaws provision, if you want to approve that, takes 2 readings and a vote by 2/3 majority vote of the body at 2 meetings in order to effectuate the bylaw change. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman. But recommend approval of both of those items, please.
Okay, can that be done in one motion?
Just
Approval to amendment to bylaws and policies as presented is what you've got here on the agenda. So my question is, can that be one motion, or does it have to be two motions and two votes?
I would recommend two motions and two votes, and the reason for that is that the bylaw provision requires, the bylaws process provides the specificity requires a 2/3 majority vote at two separate meetings. The policy document does not have that requirement. So if you wanna disjoin those, so in case there's any change in policy or direction, they're not conjoined. So I would recommend two separate actions, one on each of those items.
Mr. Chair.
Questions for Mr. Gregory?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Carroll, please.
My question is, in order to even have 2/3, we have 2/3 of the membership available today if we chose to move forward on the action. As it's stated, we need 2 meetings to do so. And so I think it's something relevant to know before we start the vote.
So your point is that we need 2/3 of the body present. Mr. Gregory?
Well, that's why I would ask Ms. Firestone to make sure that we're at 2/3 majority votes available, and here, so that the board could do that.
If not, it's really not worth moving forward if we don't at least have 2/3 present.
Yeah, it's a tooth.
Okay, well, let's take a brief moment and let Mrs. Firestone look at the quorum that we have today and see if that constitutes 2/3, as Mr. Carroll has brought forward.
And it's 2/3 of all votes on the MPO policy board.
Okay. So if we've got 2/3 of the membership here today voting and everybody agrees, then it would be okay. I see Mr. Carroll's head going up and down, so he's agreeing with me.
Just for clarification,
Yes,
if
Ms. Dodd.
somebody's not here, or like the city of Richmond with one representative, I believe, but they have 4 votes, so it's 2/3 of the votes, not necessarily the members.
It's 2/3 of the votes.
That's correct. You're exactly right.
Thank you for that distinction,
exactly
Mr.
right.
Hodges. I think that's important. So, again, in your tabulations, Ms. Firestone, please do the weighted voting, if you would.
I don't believe we have 2/3, no. We have, Mr. Gregory, if you could help me with that, because I have never looked at the requirements
So
for
we
weighted
need to know the
votes. I
total
need to-
weighted votes, and then you would need to know of the total weighted votes, the representation here, does that equal 2/3 of the total weighted votes?
And we know the number of votes are in the bylaws.
Are we there yet?
We do not have 2/3.
We do not.
We do not.
Okay. Ms. Lascalette?
Okay, so we have Chesterfield, Henrico, and City of Richmond represented. That's 4 votes. We have let's start,
12 so far.
right, we've got 27 total votes, is that correct?
Ms.
According to the
Firestone,
bylaws,
what is the
yes.
total votes?
According to
Total
the
weighted
bylaws.
votes, Mr. Carroll, do you have that number?
According to the bylaws, she's correct, that on page 3 of 9, on page 26 of the packet, it shows that there should be a total of available 27 votes within the region. And the question is, if it's weighted and we can actually, one person representing each jurisdiction can actually carry the votes of all of those, then I actually do believe we would need 18 votes, which would be 2/3 of 27, 3 times 9 is 27. We need 18 votes in order to have 2/3 available. And I believe if looking at this right, we should have 21 votes available today, which is beyond the 2/3 requirement.
Yes, we do.
I get that number.
Hey,
I agree
we went to
with
the same math school.
Yep, you got it, I agree with you.
All right, so we've got crosstabs with Mr. Hodges and Mr. Carroll that we have the necessary votes to go forward with the 2/3.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Gregory.
I believe it depends on how each member jurisdiction appoints its representatives and respective votes. So if you look at the members and alternates present, in your meeting minutes, for instance, if you want to follow along, you can look at the old meeting minutes, which sets forth the membership of the organization. Each jurisdiction can appoint, and if you look at the bylaws, voting, Article 6 of the bylaws sets forth that voting member organizations shall designate one representative to cast all of its votes or multiple representatives to cast any number of its votes up to the number of representatives prescribed by the governor of Virginia, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. So each jurisdiction has identified its voting member or members, and if they're identified here, it sets forth what authority they have. For instance, Charles City County has one vote and they have Mr. Coda and one alternate in case he can't attend. Henrico County has 4 votes, if I'm correct.
Yes.
But they have appointed 2 members, which each of which have the authority to cast 2 votes if they're here. And then they have one alternate who is empowered to cast 2 votes if they're here. So it depends on who's here and what authority they have. So that's how the organization is set up. That's what the bylaws provide. By my counting, I could be wrong, been known to happen with math. There are only 10 votes of the 27 available for the organization, only 10 votes here represented.
Good Lord.
Right.
So that's how the organization chose to operate, because by my recollection, the desire was to have as many elected representatives here at the meetings as possible.
Right, so we can't go forward.
What I'd like for you to do is, I would like for you to go around and share with the members how their jurisdiction has elected to have their membership voting, because I'm not sure everybody's aware of that. For example, Henrico County is here today. Mr. Thornton represents, as my understanding, 2 votes. But the other 2 votes for the total of 4 isn't here today. So Henrico's only got 2 votes here today, as I understand your interpretation of the bylaws, or the way that we're set up, Mr. Gregory.
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
Now, I don't have however Henrico County made their appointments to this body, I don't have that documentation, how that was acted upon or communicated.
In between now and the next meeting, I would like something going back to the jurisdictions, regurgitating back to them how they've elected to resource their votes down here, so that we can make sure that we have the representation down here to have the 2/3 vote next meeting. Because we were kind of caught unaware of this going into this meeting. So I don't like that part of how we're doing business. So I want to make perfectly clear what we need to do, and each jurisdiction needs to do in terms of having the representation that they've elected to have down here.
I think we did.
To be able to have the 2/3 vote. Okay? Chad, would you make sure that that happens?
Yes, sir.
All right, now, we can vote on the policy change, is that correct?
Yes,
Mr. Gregory?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Howard.
if I'm not remiss here, it's my understanding we discussed that with our attorney, and we discussed that one person could carry all 4 votes for Chesterfield County. was my understanding.
That's what
We
we
discussed, can you confirm as well, another board member confirms that one person can carry all 4 votes for Chesterfield?
If so designated, that's correct. It's up to the jurisdiction to designate the voting authority of the appointed member.
And that's what we did in one of our meetings.
Therefore, it would be incumbent upon the organization to have that documented.
Right, and that's
As
what I'm
such.
asking for, Mr. Holland.
Yes, sir.
Is that clarification back to you
Yes.
about what your locality elected to do in terms of the representation of your votes so that you could have the requisite membership
Yes, sir.
here at the meeting so that we could get to the 2/3 vote that we needed?
And
Yes, sir.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the appointed representation of each jurisdiction is reflected in the attendance document that is included in the minutes. So that sets forth, for instance, Chesterfield County, the representatives are Mr. Carroll, Mr. Holland, and Mr. Winslow, and Ms. Haley is the alternate. So 2 of you are here. You have 4 votes, and I assume that each of you have authority to cast 2 votes apiece.
Or they're saying, excuse me, Mr. Gregory, they're saying that any one of them can cast all 4 votes.
Yes, that's our understanding. Any one of us can cast all 4 votes in Chesterfield.
So I think like I said, I want clarity before the next meeting of what we've elected to have with the representation of the localities in the voting. And if they need to make any changes, Mr. Gregory, can they do that?
They can.
Okay, so when you get back to your locality and you find out how you're set up to vote, if you want to make any changes, then you need to contact Chet and let Chet know. Martha?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that if the intention of a locality is to
Check with Jim.
have multiple members attend for that locality,
Yeah.
but allow a member to carry all of the votes, that should be communicated. I think that's the instruction that you're asking for. But if that is intended to change month to month, there would be no way that staff would know that unless you share it with us. So when we call roll, we have no idea how many votes are being voted for each person. So I would just
Martha, I
ask,
understand your concern, and I don't want to cause staff confusion. I don't think it's the intent of this body to be changing every month the way that they're gonna be voting. I think what you've got before us right now is clarification about what was communicated back as to how that locality would be represented with their votes. And I'm like Mr. Carroll and Mr. Holland. I always thought that the locality had the option, if one person was there and they had 4 votes, then that one person could cast all 4 votes. Now, if they've got 3 people down here, whatever reason, any one of the 3, if they elected to, could cast all 4 votes, or they could partition the votes among the 3 people.
and I think if I may, Mr. Chair, that's the piece that I do not believe has been communicated to us. For example, what to do in that situation where there are 3 named representatives from the county with 4 votes. How do those 4 votes get allocated, especially in the instance where 2 members are here and 1 is not? We do not have that information.
Nobody has it.
So,
Nobody has it.
so that's I think what we
Ours is on the way.
Yeah, I think
Nobody
what
has
you're,
it.
I understand what you're saying is you don't know which one of, let's just say Chesterfield has 3 people. You don't know which one is designated to be the go-to person for all 4 votes for Chesterfield, which particular meeting.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if Chesterfield tells you any one of those 3 individuals can cast 4 votes, you should be okay.
Yeah.
And then we would just need to know who to call for the roll and who not to call. As you can see,
You call all
imagine.
of them.
You would-
You
you
call
would-
everybody.
You can,
Call all of them.
you can call all of them, it doesn't make any difference. Or you can call just the person that's been designated, and then if they're not here, if they've designated the other 2 as being able to cast all 4 votes, you would roll to number 2.
There you go, exactly.
If that's the pleasure of the
Yeah.
board, then I would say that staff would very, very much request your patience with us as we call, because that would mean that we just would need to calculate that for each locality. So I think we can make it work, but I just would ask for everyone's patience as we work through that.
Well,
Sliding
with the
assignment.
exception of this bylaw change, we really haven't had this as a
That's right.
problem.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's usually not.
We're not CVTA, okay? So this is really a unique situation that I don't see as an ongoing
No.
issue, Martha.
I certainly hope not.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
The scenario that you and Ms. Lascolette raised works in terms of calling everybody from a particular jurisdiction. Let's use Chesterfield as an example. Unless Dr. Holland votes one way and Mr. Carroll votes another way, which one of them has the votes for Chesterfield? Or do you split them? There needs to be some understanding in that
They have
part.
to work that out.
I do have the voting membership and the notes for each jurisdiction. Would you like me to read through those? Or would you like me to just send that out
Send.
afterwards?
I don't think it's gonna do any good to
Everybody
people
has
here at
different
the meeting. I would like for you to send it out,
Yes.
so that the localities will have an opportunity to review what they've told us. And then the representatives here at the table can go back and share the concerns that have arisen from this meeting about how the voting will occur. And then it's up to the localities to get back to you to tell you what their druthers are and how they want it to work in casting their votes.
And I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Please.
it needs to be clear so that going into the meetings, the votes, staff knows how to tabulate what votes, who has what authority, because Mr. Parsons is exactly right. Everything is fine until
It's not.
it's a dispute. And then if there is a dispute and it's unclear who has what authority, then you're gonna have a problem.
Then they'll have to arm wrestle at the table and figure it out.
Yeah, right, but that's not fair to the organization, because the organization needs to know
We're
who
gonna,
has
we're
what
gonna get the
authority.
clarification, I believe, coming back from the jurisdictions. But again, the situation that we have today at this meeting is anomalous in terms of how we conduct business on a monthly basis. We don't have this thing about 2/3 vote, who gets to vote and represent the votes from the jurisdictions. This has only come up now, I can remember ever coming up, and it's because we're changing the bylaws. So I don't see this as a problem going forward, but now that it's before us, we can get the clarification we need, particularly now that the jurisdictions understand the nomenclature of voting. Okay, so at this point, staff has their instructions about updating you with what you've already told staff in terms of where you want your voting representation. So we can entertain a motion for the policy change that accompanies the bylaws change. Is that correct, Mr. Greger?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Lascolette?
I just had one comment on.
Yes, ma'am.
As we send this information out to our members, I just strongly, and you may do this anyway, but I just strongly recommend you get an affirmative answer back from each voting jurisdiction. If you don't hear from them, don't just assume that that's what they want. I think we really need to nail this down so we're very clear where everybody is. It's just my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Lascolette. Okay, at this point, do we have a motion for a policy change that's been presented this morning?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thornton has made the motion for the policy change that's being presented this morning. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, and I just have some discussion.
Mr. Carroll has seconded the motion, so comments on the motion?
Just one question, what is the correct timing on this? Because we're gonna change a policy or add a policy which is addressing a amendment to the bylaws that we have not passed.
Exactly.
And so me personally, I think that it's putting the cart before the horse. I think we should make sure that the membership wants to change the bylaws first, and then if that's the case, then move forward with the policy change. If not, then we can vote to approve it today, and then if for some reason, which I don't think would happen, the membership voted not to approve the amendment to the bylaws, then we can just simply have another vote to remove that. So it's just procedural, that's all.
So your question or your issue is which comes first, the changes to the bylaws or the policy, and which governs which? Does the policy govern the bylaws, or do the bylaws dictate what the policy is gonna be?
Pretty sure.
Is that the issue?
Yes.
Okay. Other comments?
I see Dr. Newbill.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Newbill, please.
Yes, I just had a couple of questions, and these were just points of clarification probably. I wanted to know what type of specificity would be required for requesting electronic meetings by period. And then what about emergency? Yeah, so that would be the first thing. What electronic communications by members limited to 2 meetings? What about emergency orders? Are we going to build that into the policy as well? And when I say emergency orders issued by locality or otherwise.
Yes, ma'am. The policy and procedure incorporates, or it doesn't need to, but it does incorporate the applicable provision of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act 2.23708.2 under
Okay.
which all public bodies operate. So that code provision provides for the emergency declaration circumstance that you reference. So if there is an emergency declaration, then that would trigger the ability to go into closed meeting or to go into electronic meetings just generally going forward. Yes, ma'am.
And then for the member who has opportunity to request a couple of times, what kind, do we give the type of specificity that would be required for their participation electronically?
Yes, you would need to specify, if they were not under an emergency declaration and a member
Right.
had to participate remotely due to a personal medical condition or a medical condition of a family member, or
Okay.
for a personal matter, up to 2 meetings a year or 25% of the public body's meetings per year. You could do that.
Okay.
That member would have to notify the chair of the circumstances ahead of time, and their participation remotely would have to be approved by the body at that particular meeting.
Okay, thank you. I have parts of this before me, but not the entirety. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Newbill. Any other comments? We've got a motion with a second, and the motion is, Mr. Gregory?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Carroll's comments are on point, and I think it would be prudent to sort of put this off. You certainly don't have to, but it would make sense to put this off until the bylaws matter was resolved. I don't think it would make a difference either way, because you couldn't, without the bylaws change, you wouldn't be able to put this policy into effect anyway.
Okay, I'm not gonna get caught up with, what is the order in which we would do this. Ms. Thornton, you wanna withdraw your
Mr.
motion?
Chairman, I would withdraw my
Motion.
amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thornton. So that will move us then to the next part of our agenda. And Mr. Parsons, I believe you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 7A is related to the existing work program that the TPO is operating under. I wanted to just bring to your attention that we are going to be proposing an amendment to that work program for 3 reasons. The first reason is we, as you know, as of October 15th of 2021, we had an adjustment to the boundaries of the TPO. We wanted to reflect that change in the work program. Right now it shows the previous boundary. The second item is that in working with VDOT, we have identified that an additional work task needs to be added to cover some RSTP funding that we have received for scenario planning. This is a work effort that is on the cusp of beginning. It will begin before the end of the fiscal year. And in order to separate that funding and identify the specific task related to that work task, we wanted to add an additional item to the work program. And the final reason is, as you know, just about every year there are changes in priorities or emphasis areas as the year goes on. We have had a couple work tasks where we have identified additional needs in the community and have program staff to work there. So we just need to make some adjustments within the allocated budgets to better reflect the work that's actually been done this fiscal year. So that amendment is being developed, and I would hope would come to you possibly next month for action. We want to take it in front of the TAC first and make sure that there are no concerns. But that's the first information item. The second item is related to next year's work program, starting in July of 2022. And I just wanted to share a few slides to go over the updates. Okay, and that should be on the screen now for the folks at home. Each year, we work with our federal partners at FHWA and FTA to identify any particular items that are recommended for MPOs to be considering at that time. We also obviously take the temperature of where things are in the region and where the energy is in terms of the work that we are undertaking. As some background, the work program is our budget and outlines all the tasks that the TPO and staff are supposed to be working on for the fiscal year, which is July 1 through June 30th. All these activities are required and address federal and state planning and programming requirements and any regional needs that have been identified. We do focus on 4 core program areas. That's how our work program is set up. Program support and administration, supporting the board is a great example of that type of program area. General development and comprehensive planning. As you know, we are increasing our focus on public engagement and equity analysis. Those types of things are broad and cover all of our TPO programs. So that's under that second program area. Long-range transportation planning. It's typically focused on our long-range plan. We just completed that last fall. This is where scenario planning will also come into play, and that's going to be a major work product for our staff in the next year. And then short-range transportation planning. This is primarily focused on our funding programs and our sub-allocation of federal dollars, working with our TAC to make sure that local needs are identified, and this is where we have a lot of our competitive application processes and the work that goes into helping get projects done. Federal Transit Administration, an additional identification of planning emphasis areas for this year. And the hope is that those can be incorporated into all of the TPO work programs around the country. And those 8 items are identified here on the screen. Equity and justice in transportation planning, public involvement, planning and environmental linkages, data and transportation planning are some of the highlights. Clean energy and resilience is another one. So the next few slides outline some of the priorities that I've identified in discussing with senior staff. Scenario planning is a major one, and this is you'll be educated on this a lot, assuming we're able to move forward with this. But it's really a work effort to identify ways that all of the different planning disciplines from around the region are entwined and impact each other. So transportation is one of those things, but this is a tool to look at how transportation impacts housing, how environmental conditions impact safety. All of those things are able to be looked at together in this type of tool. The second item is investing in transportation to capitalize on workforce mobility, accessibility, involving a lot of freight transit, multimodal connectivity, and equity. This is something that we have not been able to focus on a lot the past few years, and we want to double our efforts there. Expanding access to transit is another effort that is critical to this region. With the passage of the recent Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there are options for lots of other funding considerations, and we want to really dive in and get a good understanding of what we can how we can better position the region to be shovel-ready and have access to some of these funds as we move forward. Identifying strategies for further integrating performance measures. You may be aware we've identified a set of tools in our long-range planning process that considers data first and foremost, as opposed to qualitative types of measures to assess and prioritize different types of projects around the region. We want to make sure that that type of tool is available for all kinds of different activities. Right now, we're incorporating that in the CBTA project evaluation process as well. But we wanted to look at it across all different funding levels and other types of things. The next few slides are identifying on the screen. We have identified with blue font. These are all items that were those planning emphasis areas recommended by Federal Highways and Federal Transit. So data management, equity and justice, tackling the climate crisis, safe streets, public engagement, and planning and environmental linkages are all things that staff thinks we can build into our program and make it more robust and comprehensive. So I think we're going to suggest including these types of things in our work program as well. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll stop the brief overview and ask if there's any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Parsons? Yes, John.
I appreciate the presentation by Mr. Parsons. Will we be getting a copy of this?
Yeah, happy to share that. Yes, sir.
I would like. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Other questions for Mr. Parsons?
Mr. Chair.
Please, Ms. Huskell.
So the factors that you ran through in those last couple slides that might be considered, is that something this body decides to include?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, we're not asking for any action right now.
No, right.
These are
Just
the draft,
future,
and
right.
and yes, the policy board will take action on this eventually.
With that, we will go to our updates from VDOT. Mr. Mann.
Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry.
we had the agenda was amended.
Oh,
to
I'm sorry,
include
please.
The bike ped plan.
Yeah, go, please.
I believe Ms. Jaycox is with us.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm going to ask Janice to put up my brief PowerPoint. Thank you very much. And I see it. Slide view. Very good. Thanks. I'm glad to be here with you. If not in person, I'm certainly here in spirit, and would like to just give you a real brief overview of the draft Bike Ped RVA 2045 plan, as we are calling it. It updates the last comprehensive look at active transportation, which was in 2004 with the Richmond Regional Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. This update represents the culmination of a 2-year planning process, which actively engaged a steering committee of representatives from the localities, state agency partners, and advocates. It's a planning effort that essentially ran concurrent with the Connect RVA 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan. Much of the public engagement through that process was virtual because we were in the pandemic period where we had to stay apart. But upon the adoption of that plan in October of 21, we realized how important additional public input would be for the Bike Ped 2045 plan. So we extended our planning period by about 6 months. And we come before you today to request your consideration in opening the official public review process on February 9th through March 23rd, so we could get out into the community for more in-person meetings. I'll provide a real brief update of the planning effort to date. We start with a call to action, and that's this slide is depicting a call to action that represents what we've heard from the community, what we've heard from you. Call to action for safe streets. 80% of our regional street network is really capable of serving cyclists, walkers, and those using mobility devices due to their lower posted speed limits and lower traffic volumes. But 32 pedestrians were killed in 2020 by vehicles while walking, the most the region has experienced in the last decade. The good news is that severe injuries have declined, but bike ped fatalities have increased by more than 78% over the last 5 years. Safety is the number one concern that we heard from the policy board and from public feedback we heard from during the Connect 2045 review. Next slide. We collectively spent a lot of time with our committee. I think we had 8 different meetings. We had the 9th yesterday, capturing thoughts and issues and categorizing these 6 guiding principles for the plan. This was done early in the planning process so that we would make sure we focused on these 6 guiding principles. Many that you've heard about today that'll be part of our work program. Next slide. And with this discussion, we carefully crafted a vision statement. A lot of this was built out of some of the virtual involvement through the Connect 2045, plus our in-committee involvement. The vision statement has a focus on safety, connectivity, and equity, as expressed, we hope to in all regional and in local comprehensive and related plans and implementing ordinances and guidelines with specific goals and objectives. On the next slide. The goal of providing more equitable access, addressing the goals of safety, environmental respect, to strengthen the economy and provide choice and mobility. All of these, we feel, contribute to a more resilient transportation system. Next slide. The plan tells the story of possible solutions and avenues for us to pursue through implementation to address this vision and the goals and objectives. And it's illustrated through 6 big regional ideas that are shown here. We're using selected sub-areas throughout the region that share common characteristics and opportunities for filling the gaps in the existing network, for possible extensions of regional shared use paths that are meeting the needs of neighbors and underrepresented populations, and providing multimodal options. These ideas are born from the planning framework that is in the plan and considers our existing assets, strengths, opportunities, and challenges. Next slide. The plan is meant to be part of a robust digital presence on a bikepedrva.org Esri-based website that will be frequently updated with new data, project information, and guidance for the localities who are very much a partner with us to implement the plan over the next 25 years. This plan will not be one you put on the shelf. We want it to have an active life. And our steering committee responded enthusiastically yesterday that they would like to remain involved in working through Plan RVA to maintain that involvement. We would welcome your input and recommendations of any groups or organizations or your own district meetings that we can reach out to or attend during this period of time from February 9th to March 23rd. And we'll be hosting the Bike Ped RVA plan as part of the Plan RVA Better Together webinar on the 17th of February. So now that leads us to the last slide, which is the action requested. We resolve that the RRTPO board approves the opening of the public review period for the draft Bike Ped RVA 2045 plan as presented by staff, and further resolve that I've lost some words. As presented by staff, this would be February 9th through March the 23rd. And we further resolve that the RRTPO Policy Board authorizes the Technical Advisory Committee to review the draft plan along with public comments and input received during this process at their April 12th meeting. And I'd be open to any questions that I can certainly answer or clarification on the action requested. Thank you very much for your time.
Any questions for Barbara?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Okay.
Please, John.
Go ahead.
Two quick ones. Ms. J. Cox, does this include the Ashland pilot project and recommendations for complete streets?
Yes, sir, it does very much. I'm glad you brought that up because that is the toolbox, the complete street toolbox that we've been building and will continue to build. Lots of lessons learned from our pilot project in Ashland. Thank you.
And the timing is good. Hopefully the public participation will include a trip to Ashland and a presentation of that document.
We would welcome that. We'll certainly be in touch with you about organizing that and helping with us.
That'd be great. And the last question was, could we get a list of the current members of the review committees so that we could suggest others appropriately?
Certainly.
I see Mr.
Yes, and
Martin.
it's in the plan, the folks that have been on the steering committee. And we would welcome more.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Barbara. Great presentation. Just wondering as we move forward, since this is a plan for 2045, as we look even here in the streets of Ashland, there are a lot of transportation vehicles other than cars, scooters, electric scooters,
That's right.
skateboards, et cetera. And when we were in overseas, had that little window of opportunity to go overseas in September, we saw in Paris a lot of motorized scooters being used in addition to bicycles, et cetera. Just want to make sure that as we continue to discuss that we sort of look at all of the types of transportation resources that people are using and give that a thought in all of our processing thoughts. Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, sir. We certainly do have a big section on e-bikes and other transportation modes. I know that's particularly of interest to the urbanized areas as well and how to regulate them. So that's a good reason why we want this plan to have a life on the website that can continually be supplemented. We'll have the foundational plan, which will be posted on the website as of February 9th for all of you to look at and the public to review. But we want to keep it current with technology and all the opportunities that we have to influence greater use of active transportation.
Any other questions or comments for Barbara?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Lusk, go ahead.
Ms. J. Cox, thank you for the presentation.
Yes.
I have two questions. Would you bring the resolution back up?
Yes, Janice.
Maybe our staff, because I just had a question. So it's further resolved, that, that TAC review the draft plan once the public comments are in and what input they've received, and then what happens after that?
Okay, then we would be, of course, assimilating those comments and bringing it to them on April the 12th at their meeting, and then share it, of course, the results back with the policy board at your meeting in May.
So in May, are we expected to vote on this in May?
That is what our hope is, and we would be open to any work sessions or anything in the interim before you are asked to consider it for adoption.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that. I was just trying to get the process. That's
Yes,
all.
and we would welcome any opportunity to meet with any of your folks in Goochland or the board as well.
All right, and my second question to you is, on this committee, how many folks do you have that are in extremely rural areas?
We have every locality represented. Tom Coleman has been serving on the steering committee.
Thank you.
Yes,
That's what I need to know. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman, of the action as requested by the committee.
We have a motion from Mr. Holland for approval.
Second.
And I have a second from Mr. Hodges. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Firestone, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Lumpkins.
Aye.
Ms. LaScalette.
Aye.
Henrico County, Mr. Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Chair Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Thank you. Dr. Newville.
Aye.
Thank you. GRTC, Ms. Tim.
Aye.
And Mr. Mann.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for that matter.
Thank you, Ms. Firestone.
Thank you.
So it's not.
So that moves us to our part on the agenda for our transportation agency updates. Mr. Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Start off with some highlights from the January CTB meeting. Workshop presentations were received on Winter Storm Frito, which was the I-95 incident that occurred up north of here. Multi-use trails policy, transportation alternatives program, project pipeline update, and the revised fiscal year 22 to 27 Commonwealth Transportation Fund 6-year financial plan. So those are some highlights from the presentations at the workshop. And at the action meeting, some highlights. The CTV adopted the revised fiscal year 22 annual budget for the Commonwealth Transportation Fund and for VDOT. And they adopted the revised fiscal year 22 to 27 6-year improvement program. The next CTB meeting will be, workshop is February 15th at 10 a.m. The action meeting is February 16th at 9 a.m. I will note this will be the first meeting run by our new Secretary of Transportation, W. Shepard Miller III is his name. Smart Scale update, round 5. The final round 5 technical guide has been released and is now available on the Smart Scale website. The pre-applications are anticipated to open March 1st. Just another reminder that the concept application development assistance is available through VDOT Richmond District Planning. Just reach out to us and let us know what we can do to help you. And the VDOT cost estimating training that was scheduled was postponed. As soon as we have some information on that getting rescheduled, we will share it with everyone so you can all attend if you would like to. 6-year improvement plan development. Development of the fiscal year 23 to 28 6-year improvement program will begin this spring, and we do anticipate having public meetings again this year, so we'll be getting those scheduled very soon and let everyone know of those dates. Fall Line Trail update. VDOT staff continues to work with localities to determine which segments of the trail can be advanced most efficiently, and we're working with the CBTA Fall Line Working Group to get all that put together for implementation. And lastly, there are no public hearings or willingness to hold public hearings within the TPO study area at this time.
Questions for Mr. Mann? Quick question, Mr. Mann. What was the train that you said got canceled? You mentioned something about
The VDOT was going to do some cost estimating trainings to help with Smart Scale and other competitive applications, and we postponed that due to some COVID concerns. Quite honestly, we didn't want to put 50 people in a room together a few weeks ago, so we're going to try to reschedule that in the next month.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
But the applications are due March 1st. I'm sorry.
That's pre-application is March 1st.
Right, so this should be done before March 1st, right?
The training, we're going to try our best. We got to get back on the schedule.
Thank you.
But we are available to assist individually if anybody needs it.
Unless there's any more questions from Mr. Mann, I will go to Mr. Brule with DRPT.
I will be very brief. We did file our report
resulting from House Joint Resolution 542. It's a transit equity and modernization study. So we have completed our interim report. It's available on the project website. That interim report does really put out there our initial findings based on the 6 technical areas that were outlined in the legislation, and also summarizes our outreach with the transit agencies and the public. We are working now to take the next steps with that interim report to complete our action plan. That is due to the General Assembly in August. So that was legislation that was introduced by Delegate McQuinn last year. I will also add regarding Smart Scale, our office is available to provide the same technical assistance that VDOT does for transit and rail projects. Please just reach out to our team if you have any interest in submitting applications in this upcoming cycle. And that is all I have for you today.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions, Mr. Brule? If not, we will move to future topics for our meetings. And, you know, folks, this is your chance to get engaged. Now, I've heard people, you know, not be enthusiastic about staff presentations and things like that. This is your chance to put forward anything that you want to put forward with what you think is important for this region as it pertains to transportation. Because staff is only too willing to accommodate you and any request for topics that are of interest. So, chair is open for any suggestions, comments from members. What would you like to see? Ms. Page.
I don't know how realistic it is, but I think because we do have a new Secretary of Transportation, that we would extend an invitation. Not that Mr. Mann does not do an excellent job of his presentations. However, I think that we would extend an invitation for the Secretary to join us at a meeting, simply for him to be introduced and to see what we do, and to and better understand where his focus and his plans and goals are.
Excellent idea. This man needs to be watched, I think.
I'll make sure the invitation gets back up to the secretary.
Do we need to do an invitation from this body, extending a personal invitation, Mr. Parsons?
Yes, sir, we can certainly put that
If you
together.
draft something from me, you know, going to him, formally extending the invitation, Mr. Mann's gonna follow up and work the inside route and trying to get our secretary to come and join us for a meeting, and I think that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Page.
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend including our CTB representative as well.
Please.
Thank you.
Please. I think that's an excellent idea as well. Any other suggestions? Yes, Mr. Thornton.
Mr. Chairman, I think we also should keep in mind that we're trying to get more public input about what we do. And one of our challenges, I think, that we need to think about is language. We use these terms all the time, but I was thinking this morning, if a person just looked at us for the first time, we'll be using language that they never heard of. So I think one of the things that we need to be sensitive to is don't assume that everybody understands that term. And let's do a little bit of defining, very briefly, these terms that we use, so that public said, that's too much for me. I don't think I want to listen to all that, hear all that. So we need to be very sensitive to the terminologies that we use for this organization. And we don't think about it because we hear them all the time. But a new person said, what in the world is that? So that's just a thing that all of us need to work on.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. That's a good thought, because we do use a lot of acronyms down here, don't we? So if you're watching the meeting, you're not going to necessarily be able to follow all those acronyms. So I think your point is that we maybe need to pause at different points and explain the program, or briefly, you know, give some type of insight as to what CMAQ, for example, would be, or RSDP block funding, just to add information to the acronym so that people following our meetings will have a better understanding of what we're doing. So thank you. Any other suggestions? Ms. Vasculette?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see, I know we're looking at, and these are on the list, you know, the bike paths, the pedestrians, we talked about the Fall Line Trail, some of these other initiatives, micro transit, that have nothing to do with where I live. Nothing, not one thing. So I'd like to see at least one session that focuses on rural parts of this region and what is going on. I mean, this, like I said, none of this applies to me at all. Now, parts of our county, the villages, yeah, there's a little tiny piece that might apply, but you know, 85% of the county, it doesn't. So I just like us to have a discussion about what's happening in the rural parts of this region.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We always get left out, don't we?
Well, I'd like to add, it was interesting at CVTA meeting, Mr. Cotto actually brought forward the fact that in Charles City, they don't even have a stoplight. And he painted himself or the county as the, the special needs child. So Mr. Thornton has always done a good job of including rural localities in any discussion. We had a discussion at CVTA a couple of months ago where we talked about the importance of a regional transportation system and how the jurisdictions weren't silos upon themselves or to themselves. That, for example, as Powhatan being a rural community, we are the workforce for the Richmond region. In Powhatan, you can watch everybody get up in the morning, walk to their truck or their car, and drive to 288 to get to where the jobs are. In Henrico, Richmond, Chesterfield, and to a lesser extent, Hanover. So having a rural transportation system is important to all of us. You know, it's not just about our urban, suburban areas, it's about our rural areas as well and how we get to and from the jobs.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Vasculette, I'm going to endorse, you know, your comments along with Ms. Page that we do include something that's more indigenous to the rural localities. Check. Any other comments, recommendations? Mr. Thornton?
I'll be quiet after this, Mr. Chairman.
No, we want you to talk.
No, we want you to talk.
But you know, you just gave me another idea for us to think about. Some of my town meetings, we do exactly what Ms. Lascala is talking about. We go to visit certain areas there. So maybe, like when I came to visit you,
yes,
more of us need to see what some of those beautiful areas look like.
Yes, you do.
Because they're all a part of this, you know, District 15.
Road trip.
And so, yeah, and you know, it sells us. So if we can sell it to us, we sell it to others. So she brought up a good point. Good point.
Thank you,
maximize it.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. And to Mr. Thornton's credit, he came out and actually did a tour, a transportation tour in Powhatan County. So he can better understand what my needs are as a rural county, and I applaud him for that.
Yeah.
You know, as the chairman of CVTA, he reached out and volunteered to come to Powhatan County. That meant a lot because, you know, this whole thing about Region 15, it's all about relationships. And the relationships we form around this table and the trust that comes from those relationships, that's what builds a transportation system in the region. Anyway, any more comments? Recommendations? Okay, that moves us to chairman comments. I don't have any at this time. Our next meeting is March 3rd. Everyone be safe, and we will see you then. We are adjourned.
All right. I think you can get them down from.